All right. Welcome, everybody, to the From Morning to Action podcast. This is your host, Dr. Damon Silas. And this podcast is all about talking to people about their losses, the different losses that have happened in their lives, and talking to them about how they've taken action through those losses. So this is all based on my two books, From Morning to Night, Overcoming Loss, as well as What's Your Action Plan? 6 Powerful Ways to Get Unstuck in Your Life Right Now. And today I am actually thrilled. I'm super excited about having this brother on the show today. Yes. This is actually take 3, I believe. And
like
the third time is going to be the lucky charm. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce my brother. I've been dancing with him for years prior to 2018. So I think we started dancing together. Shoot, I can't remember, 2004, 5, 6, somewhere. Yep. And from that point on, I've just been able to see him and watch him continuously grow into the entrepreneur who he is. And he's constantly grinding. If you follow him on social media, which I'm sure he will give you that information eventually, but you'll see him always on the go. And so I am just honored to be able to talk to him today about not only his losses, but how he has worked and continues to work through them. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Brother Crishon Jerome, a.k.a. Crome.
Cue audience. Thank you for having me, good sir. I'm definitely honored, happy to be here for the third time. You know, I was just, telling you before we hit record that, if this one doesn't work for some reason, I'm just going to have to fly down, man. So you send me that private plane, I'll be down there first thing.
I got you. All I got to do is hop on the phone and make it happen.
Yes.
Yes, sir. Well, yeah. So, Krishan, do me a favor and tell the people a little bit about yourself. In terms of, you don't have to go into a full, because I know you got a lot on your plate, but just maybe in a minute or two, tell the people what you do, what you're up to right now, and then we'll go into your loss and working through your action plan.
Okay, great. Well, I am 31 years old, born and raised in Atlanta, Georgia originally. Moved to D.C. in 2005 to attend school at Georgetown University, where I actually received degrees in government and psychology. After college, couldn't get a job in government, and so ended up pursuing my passions for dance and booked a few jobs and decided to make it a full-time thing as opposed to just something that I did on the side. And my dance career turned into being able to perform and choreograph and create with some of the most amazing, talented folks in the world, from big brands and companies and music artists and things of that nature. And then somewhere along the way, decided to brand myself and call the company Crome to honor my father, who we'll talk about in this podcast. And Crome, we specialized in fashion and entertainment. On the fashion side, we had a clothing line. On the entertainment, it was everything dance related, from choreography to creative direction to artist development. And then most recently, we expanded into the area of VR, virtual reality, providing mobile gaming experiences and opportunities for events, both social and corporate in nature. So that's a snapshot of who I am. Take a breath.
Take a breath.
Yeah.
Look, I got to take a breath for you. It's hard too. Like, how many people can say that they ventured into that world, like literally, and virtually? It's just
right.
Again, it's great to see you constantly expanding. And I know you had mentioned your dad and him being the inspiration behind the Crome brand first and foremost. So do me a favor, and can you talk a little bit about that loss and who your father was to you and who he continues to be to and for you to this day?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. My dad was the absolute, best man I've ever known. And it's unfortunate that at the age of 10, he was taken away. He was murdered, and that certainly left quite the void in my life. But in his absence, instead of getting down, I vowed to just take that loss and use it as fuel and motivation for my journey. And so he continues to be present for me. I mean, we named our company after him, Crishon Jerome. We put those two together to come up with the name Crome, and ultimately, me keeping the Crome on me, is a way to keep him present in my life on a daily basis.
That's a powerful story. Thank you for sharing that. Where did you get? Sure. What was your motto? Like, because you said to yourself, I vow not to let that get me down, and actually for it to be my fuel. So, what was your inspiration?
Right. Well, I actually had a dream shortly after his death. I had a dream that there were cameras flashing and media folks asking me questions as to why, after having so much potential in my youth, did I grow up to become like a nobody. I was sleeping on the streets. My clothes and things were dirty and falling off of me. And I just looked at the cameras and I started to give them a bunch of excuses. I was like, well, my mom was a single mom and my dad was killed when I was young. And, these things, although true, in no way meant that I had to become a statistic. And within that dream, a little girl came up to me and she pulled on my coattail and said, but hey, mister, excuse me, all those things that you described happened to me. Does that mean I have to grow up and be like you? And that hit me for some reason. At 10 years old, this little girl asking me, was she going to grow up to, be poor, because she too had to experience and endure those things. It touched me so much so that I woke up and I was sweating and I was breathing hard and I was crying and I was just shaking my head. No, you don't. No, you don't have to grow up to be like me. And it, wasn't until later that I realized that little girl, in my opinion, was my daughter, who's now 7. And I know I needed to be around for her.
And thank you for bringing that up, because that's exactly who popped into my mind when you were talking about that little girl in your dream who is your daughter. Yep.
Yeah.
Isn't that
for sure?
How prophetic?
It's powerful, man. Definitely powerful.
Yeah, literally, I had a dream, that one day I would succeed and keep moving despite the odds being against me.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's incredible. Okay, so I'm going to go through your action plan, brother. Are you ready for it?
Let's do it.
All right. So the A is for affirmations or affirmations. So that is really, something that we say to ourselves during those times, especially when it's darkest, especially when it's hardest, especially when the odds are against you and you have people out there talking to you about how you're not going to succeed. And maybe even you started to develop that voice inside your own head. What have you said to yourself? What words have you said to yourself to really keep pushing you forward?
I think for me, it wasn't, there weren't words specifically. And fortunately, no one has ever told me I couldn't, because I've always done well at whatever I, was involved in. But I found it difficult to go to that place because for some reason, I had a lot of confidence growing up. I knew that despite our being poor, that there was more to life than what I saw and experienced, and that I would one day have it. I think it was just a self-loving belief that I would overcome, any number of adversities or circumstances that I had gone through. And I think during that time, I developed a sort of emotional strength and maturity to not allow things to get me down to the point that I couldn't, make the decisions necessary to continue to achieve. And then the other thing that hit me, the unsettling uncertainty of tomorrow following my dad's death added a sense of urgency to my hustle today. And what do I mean by that? I immediately began to appreciate the common cliche of, tomorrow isn't promised. The fact that my dad was just at my baseball game and then the next day he was gone, really gave life to those words and made it real for me. And because of that, I said, well, if tomorrow isn't promised, then I got a lot of work to do today. And it was from there that I just continued to push forward.
Yep. Man, I love it. And so, you're a rarity in a lot of ways, in that you said you've always had this confidence, and you've always been backed by people, and people have believed you and in you.
Yeah, I think, and it wasn't so much of being backed. It's just that, like they say, actions speak louder than words. My actions, and I think, a certain amount of energy touch people in a particular way. And so it wasn't so much that they were promoting, and advocating for my success, but they certainly couldn't speak against it because I was, through action, proving otherwise.
Mm-hmm. And there we are, back to action.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of it is really about taking action. Don't talk about it, be about it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. I love it. Well, and speaking of, so the C is for creativity, and I know you've done a lot through just your creative juices constantly flowing, right? So tell the people a little bit about those creative juices that you've been able to tap into to help you work through your losses and your...
Yeah, for sure. I think, we mentioned, dance earlier, and that certainly has been a form of freedom for me in the absence of, or in the seeming absence of various ways to kind of express myself. And so that has been an awesome therapy. But, going back to creating the brand, which we're now transforming into a sustainable, profitable business through the VR, is that, I used those, creative juices to form a company based around not just my dad's name, but also what he stood for: strength, beauty, endurance, integrity. Crome, right? Crome also happened to be short for chromium, which is known for for those same characteristics. And then being able to take the word, which in urban spaces, signify, guns or rims. And, ironically, he was killed, through gun violence, and to kind of take back the power and add a positive twist and spin to it. So for us, it doesn't mean this, Chrome, beyond those core values that I mentioned, simply stands for excellence and achievement. And I think that's certainly been my mission, and it certainly marked my journey.
Man, that's just... It literally almost gives me chills hearing you talking about how you've taken a negative and turned it into a positive. And it's the same thing, right? You're talking about Chrome and how your dad was taken. That's how his life was taken, from a gun.
Right.
And here you are taking
Absolutely.
that whole concept and saying, no, it can represent strength and beauty and endurance and all those things. So I just appreciate you being able to look at it from a completely different perspective, which that's what all this is about, is shifting our perspective to what can we do with our losses. I think the things that we go through in life are put there for us to learn from.
Absolutely.
And you truly have shown that. So do me a favor and tell me a little bit about, we're moving on to the T, which is talking. And, especially in the African-American community, for instance, when you talk about mental health, the idea of talking to a professional about your hurt, about your pain, about anything is taboo. There's a stigma. There's been this stigma that's been there for a long time. Like, it's hard to trust that professional, et cetera, et cetera. Now, how or who have you talked to? And it may not necessarily be a professional, but I'm just curious, who have you talked to help you work through this pain?
Well, what's funny is that, I realized that I didn't fully grieve my dad until several years later. It was a solid 10, 11 years that I had an opportunity to really just break down. And this breakdown came at the time with the young lady I was seeing, and she was asking me questions. I got to talking, and the tears just started flowing. The other time happened a few years after that, where I went to my grandmother's funeral, and she was buried next to my dad. So when I walked up and I saw his name on the plot, man, I lost it. My knees got weak, and I collapsed to the ground. And it was powerful, it was painful, but it was also, I think, much needed at the time. Outside of that, I didn't really speak to anyone. It dawned on me much later that no one ever asked me what I thought or how I felt, regarding my dad. And he was a very popular man among friends and family, and nobody ever asked me how I was doing. And so I never spoke to anyone